Emma Richardson gave a stranger $20 on a Wednesday night. 3 weeks later, lawyers in $1,000 suits walked into her workplace and accused her of murder. The stranger was dead. He'd left her $8.7 million in gold bars. And his billionaire daughter wanted Emma destroyed. Emma was 28 years old and drowning. $47,000 in debt. Her younger brother had leukemia. The treatments cost $8,000 every single month. Emma worked double shifts 6 days a week just to keep him alive. She was a waitress at a roadside diner in Bakersfield where the coffee was always burnt and the tips were never enough. On October 16th, an elderly couple walked in, Harold and Dorothy Miller. They ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, one bowl of soup to split, one side of toast. When the check came, they counted nickels and dimes on the table. They were $12 short. Emma watched them cry over soup they couldn't afford. So she pulled a 20 from her apron and paid their bill. Half her tips that night. She had no idea Harold Miller was worth $8.7 million. No idea he would die 3 days later. No idea his will named her as his only heir. Victoria Ashford arrived in a black Mercedes on October 29th. Harold's daughter, a real estate billionaire who hadn't spoken to her father in 23 years. She walked into Rosie's diner wearing Chanel sunglasses and carrying legal documents that called Emma a con artist, a manipulator, a fraud, in front of Emma's co-workers and every customer in that diner. Victoria's lawyer said Emma had poisoned Harold's mind, isolated him from family, forged his signature, stolen millions that belonged to Victoria. They gave Emma 72 hours to sign away everything. If she refused, they'd file criminal charges, elder abuse, financial exploitation, maybe even murder. Emma stood there holding a coffee pot. Her hands were shaking. She had $47,000 in debt and 5 Max credit cards. How do you fight a billionaire when you can't even afford a lawyer? If you want to see how a broke waitress beat corporate lawyers and a vengeful billionaire using nothing but security camera footage and the truth, hit subscribe. Because this channel tells stories where ordinary people discover that character is evidence that power can't erase. Emma's alarm went off at 4:47 every morning. Her studio apartment smelled like mildew and instant ramen. The walls were hospital beige. The furniture came from other people's curbs on trash day. She found the couch behind a strip mall. The table had cigarette burns and wobbly legs. The mattress on her floor came from a neighbor who'd moved out in the middle of the night. She worked 2 jobs. Mornings at a Bakersfield laundromat folding other people's underwear for $11 an hour. Evenings at Rosie's Diner on Route 58 serving truckers and construction workers who tipped in loose change. 6 days a week, 16-hour days. She came home smelling like bleach and grease and other people's sweat. Her Honda Civic had 230,000 miles on it. The check engine light had been on for 8 months. She couldn't afford to find out what was wrong. The passenger door only opened from the outside. The air conditioning died in July. She drove with the windows down and prayed it would last 1 more month, then 1 more after that. But on her nightstand, next to the lamp that flickered when the neighbor ran his microwave, sat a photograph. Her little brother Jake, 19 years old, bald from chemotherapy, grinning anyway. He had leukemia, the aggressive kind, the kind that required $8,000 in treatments every single month. Their mother's insurance covered maybe half. Emma paid the rest. She had 5 credit cards, all of them maxed. $47,000 in debt spread across medical bills, payday loans, and a hospital payment plan that took $400 every month. Money she didn't have. Money she borrowed from credit cards to pay other credit cards. The interest alone was killing her. Emma had been accepted to nursing school twice. The letter was still in her locker at the diner. She'd unfold it sometimes during her breaks, read it until the creases started to tear, then fold it back up and go refill someone's coffee. She deferred once, then twice. She couldn't afford tuition, couldn't afford to stop working, couldn't afford to be anything other than what she was. Broke, tired, drowning. Rosie's Diner had been there since 1964. It sat on Route 58 20 minutes outside Bakersfield. The kind of place that time forgot. The vinyl booths were red once. Now, they were pink and torn. Duct tape held the seats together. The stuffing leaked out like intestines. The coffee machine wheezed when you turned it on. Sounded like an old man dying. The jukebox in the corner hadn't worked since 2003. It just sat there displaying songs nobody could play anymore. The floor tiles were cracked. The walls were yellow from 60 years of cigarette smoke back when you could smoke inside. The manager was a guy named Rick. He hired people nobody else would touch. Line cooks with felony records. Dishwashers without papers. Waitresses with bad credit and worse options. Emma had worked there 3 years. She knew every regular by name. Knew who drank coffee black. Who needed extra napkins. Whose grandson just graduated college. Small things that made people feel seen. The customers were truckers, counting miles until they could go home. Construction workers trying to make paychecks last from Friday to Monday. Elderly couples ordering the cheapest thing on the menu and making it last 2 hours just for the air conditioning and someone to talk to. Through the grease-smeared windows, you could see California scrubland. Oil derricks nodding up and down like mechanical birds. Sunsets that turned the sky the color of old bruises. It wasn't beautiful. It was just there, like the diner, like the people inside it, existing because there was nowhere else to go. $47,000. That's what Emma owed. It sat on her chest every morning when she woke up. It pressed down on her lungs while she folded laundry and poured coffee and smiled at people who left dollar tips on $30 checks. Jake's treatment cost more than Emma made in 6 months. Their mother worked retail at a department store. Brought home $1,800 a month after taxes. It wasn't enough. Without Emma's money, Jake would lose a spot in a clinical trial. Without the trial, he would die. Emma stopped buying new clothes in 2022. She cut her own hair with kitchen scissors in the bathroom mirror. She ate whatever customers left on their plates. Cold fries, half-eaten burgers, toast crusts. Shame tasted like nothing when you were hungry enough. At night, she lay on her mattress and did math that never worked. How many double shifts until the debt went down? How many years until nursing school? Whether she'd still be young enough to matter when she finally made it. The numbers never added up. But every evening before her shift, Emma put on her name tag, memorized the specials, smiled at people who didn't see her, because someone had to. It was Wednesday evening, October 16th. The dinner rush had died down to scattered truckers and one elderly couple Emma had never seen before. Harold and Dorothy Miller walked in at 6:12. They moved slowly, carefully, like people who knew their bodies could betray them at any moment. They slid into booth 7, the corner spot with a torn vinyl that Emma always warned customers about. Harold was maybe 75, thin in a way that looked like sickness instead of old age. His flannel shirt had patches sewn on the elbows. Careful stitches. Someone had taken time with that. Dorothy wore a floral dress that looked homemade. Her cardigan was missing 2 buttons. Her shoes were held together with superglue. Emma could see the dried, white edges where the sole had separated and been fixed. Fixed again. Fixed however many times it took, because new shoes weren't an option. They studied the menu like it was written in another language. Heads bent close, whispering to each other, pointing at prices. Doing math Emma recognized. The math of people who counted every dollar. When Emma walked over, Dorothy looked up and smiled. The kind of warm smile that made wrinkles deepen around her eyes. The kind that felt real. What can I get you folks? They ordered the cheapest things on the menu. 1 bowl of vegetable soup to split. 1 side of wheat toast. 2 waters with lemon. Emma wrote it down. She noticed Harold's hands shaking when he set the menu down. Noticed how Dorothy folded her napkin into a perfect triangle. Noticed their wedding bands. Simple gold. No stones. Worn thin from decades of wear. She brought their order to the kitchen and didn't think about them again until 20 minutes later when their food was ready. Emma brought the soup and toast to booth 7. Set it down carefully. Harold and Dorothy thanked her in quiet voices. They ate slowly, making it last, breaking the toast into small pieces, sharing everything exactly in half, talking in murmurs Emma couldn't hear from across the diner. When they finished, Dorothy folded her napkin and placed it on the table. Precise, deliberate, like everything she did mattered. Harold raised his hand. Check please, miss. Emma printed it at the register. $11.47 with tax. She brought it over. Harold pulled crumpled bills from his pocket. 2 5s, for once. Then he started with coins. Quarters, dimes, nickels. He arranged them in careful piles on the table. Dorothy opened a small purse and added more change from a zipper compartment. They counted once, then again, moving coins from one pile to another, checking, rechecking. Harold's face turned red. His hands shook harder than before. They were short. Emma could see it before they said anything. Could see it in how Harold's shoulders hunched, how Dorothy reached over and squeezed his arm, how they looked at each other with an expression that held 50 years of shared humiliation. "We're a bit short," Harold said. His voice cracked. "We thought we had enough. We can leave our address. Mail you the rest tomorrow." Dorothy was whispering, "It's okay, honey. We'll explain. They'll understand." But Harold was crying. Not loud, not dramatic. Just silent tears sliding down weathered cheeks while he stared at the coins he'd counted twice. Emma glanced toward the back. Rick's office door was cracked open. He was watching the dining room. He always watched. If Emma paid for a customer's meal, he'd see. She'd done it before. He'd written her up, threatened to fire her next time. But this man was crying over soup he couldn't afford. Emma looked at the $20 bill in her apron. Half her tips that night. Money she needed for gas to get home. Money that would determine which bill went unpaid this month. She looked at Harold and Dorothy, at their patched clothes and glued shoes and wedding bands worn thin. She made a choice that felt both insignificant and enormous. Emma pulled the 20 from her apron, dropped it on their table like it had appeared out of nowhere. Customer at booth 3 overpaid earlier. Left this for whoever needed it next. The lie came out smooth. Is like she'd practiced it. Harold looked up, confusion breaking through tears. "What? Already been processed through the register?" Emma said. She started gathering their dishes. "Health code says we can't put it back in the till. Someone might as well use it. Have a good evening." She walked away before they could argue, before her face showed the panic spreading through her chest. She'd need to skip lunch tomorrow, maybe the next day. Gas money was gone, which meant she'd have to figure out how to make it to work on an empty tank and prayers. Behind her, she heard Dorothy crying, heard Harold say something in a broken voice she couldn't make out. When Emma turned back to clear their table, they were both standing, Harold gripping the edge for balance, both of them staring at her with expressions she couldn't name. Dorothy walked over, slow steps, careful. She reached out and took Emma's hand in both of hers. Her skin felt like paper, thin, fragile, but her grip was surprisingly strong. She leaned close enough that Emma could smell lavender soap. "God sees everything, sweetheart," Dorothy whispered. "Everything." Then they left. Emma cleared booth 7, found the 20 still sitting there, plus every dollar and coin they counted, and a note written in shaky handwriting on the back of a receipt. "For you." He showed us what's left. Emma stood there, holding that note. Her throat felt tight. Her eyes burned. Rick yelled something about table for needing refills. Emma tucked the note in her apron and got back to work. Emma forgot about Harold and Dorothy Miller. She had bigger problems. Rent due in 6 days. Her car running on fumes. Jake's next treatment in 2 weeks. The note stayed in her apron through 3 more shifts, then got transferred to her locker with old receipts and hair ties. She didn't know Harold Miller would be dead in 3 days. Didn't know Dorothy would die 6 days after that. Heart attack brought on by grief, the coroner's report would say. Didn't know that soup and toast would become evidence in a legal battle worth millions of dollars. Didn't know that $20 bill had been captured by security cameras. Time-stamped, recorded, saved. Didn't know Harold and Dorothy had been documenting her for months. Every kind word, every extra napkin, every time she refilled coffee without being asked, every customer she'd helped when she couldn't afford to help herself. She thought it was just soup. It wasn't soup. It was a test, an audition she didn't know she was taking. And she'd just been cast in a role that would either destroy her completely or change her life forever. 10 days later, Emma came home to find an envelope wedged in her apartment door. Cream-colored paper. Thick, expensive, The kind of envelope that didn't belong in her building. Return address said Whitmore and Associates, Estate Law, San Francisco. Emma's first thought was scam. She almost threw it in the trash with the pizza coupons and credit card offers. But the seal was embossed, official looking, real enough to make her hesitate. She opened it standing in her doorway, still wearing her diner uniform, still smelling like grease and coffee and other people's food. The letter began, "Dear Ms. Richardson, we regret to inform you of the passing of Harold James Miller, who named you sole beneficiary in his last will and testament, executed October 14th, 2025. Emma read that sentence 5 times. Harold, booth 7, soup and toast. The old man who'd cried over coins he couldn't count high enough. She didn't remember sitting down, but suddenly she was on her floor, back against the door, reading words that didn't make sense. Estate assets valued at $8.7 million. Real property, stocks, bonds, gold reserves. She flipped to the second page. It listed everything. Farmland in Fresno County, 43 acres. Microsoft stock purchased in 1986. A collection of 47 gold bars stamped Miller and Son Steel, 1952. Municipal bonds, treasury notes, a portfolio managed by someone named Margaret Whitmore, who apparently wanted Emma to contact her immediately to begin probate proceedings. Emma's hands shook worse than Harold had. This was a mistake. Had to be. Identity theft. Scam. One of those things where they get you on the phone and trick you into giving them your social security number. Except the letterhead looked real. The lawyer's name appeared on the California Bar Association website when Emma Googled it on her cracked phone screen. The address was a real building in downtown San Francisco. Emma sat on her apartment floor until her legs went numb, reading that letter over and over, trying to make the words mean something different, something that made sense. Harold Miller, the man who couldn't afford soup. $8.7 million. It didn't fit, couldn't fit. People like that didn't exist in Emma's world. People who had millions of dollars didn't count nickels at roadside diners, didn't cry over bills they couldn't pay, didn't wear shoes held together with glue. But the letter was real. The lawyer was real. Emma looked at her apartment, at the furniture she'd pulled from other people's trash, at the photograph of Jake on her nightstand, at the acceptance letter from nursing school she'd deferred twice because she couldn't afford to stop working. She looked at the letter again. $8.7 million. She called the number at the bottom of the page. Emma called at 6:47 the next morning, early enough that if it was a scam, maybe nobody would answer. Whitmore and Associates. How may I direct your call? The voice was professional, American, real. Emma's mouth went dry. I got a letter about Harold Miller. I think there's been a mistake. Your name, please? Emma Richardson. One moment. Hold music. 30 seconds that felt like 30 minutes. Then, Ms. Richardson, this is Margaret Whitmore. Thank you for calling. Her voice was warm, grandmother warm, but with an edge that suggested she didn't waste time on nonsense. There's been a mistake, Emma said. I barely knew Harold Miller. I understand your confusion. Let me explain. Margaret's tone shifted into something practiced, professional, like she'd given this speech before. Harold and Dorothy Miller were my clients for 34 years. Harold inherited substantial wealth from his father, a Croatian immigrant named Josip, who worked Pennsylvania steel mills for 60 years and saved every penny. When Josip died in 1978, he left Harold everything, approximately $2 million. Harold invested carefully, lived modestly, very modestly. I don't understand what this has to do with. Harold and Dorothy traveled the country, Margaret continued, spent 40 years driving an RV through small towns, eating at diners, shopping at corner stores, documenting acts of kindness they witnessed. When they found someone who showed genuine character, they rewarded them, anonymously, scholarships, paid medical bills, small inheritances left to strangers who showed compassion when nobody was watching. Emma's chest felt tight. How many people? You're number 53, and Harold's final beneficiary. Silence. Emma couldn't breathe. I gave them $20, she whispered. I know, Margaret said. I've reviewed the documentation. Security footage from Rosie's diner showing the transaction. Harold's journal entry from that night. Would you like me to read it? Emma couldn't form words. Margaret read anyway. October 16th. Bakersfield. Young waitress named Emma at roadside diner. We were short on bill, intentionally this time, to see a response. Dorothy counted coins slowly, made scene obvious. Emma watched her manager's office, knew she was being monitored, paid anyway. Gave story about overpayment to protect our dignity. Afterward, Dorothy told her God sees everything. Emma's hands were shaking. She's drowning in something, we could see it. She gave from poverty, not abundance. That's the distinction. She's the one. Emma pressed her hand against her mouth. Margaret's voice softened. Harold died of heart failure October 19th, 3 days after meeting you. Dorothy passed October 25th. Same cause. Grief-induced, the doctors said. Before he died, Harold executed his will. Everything goes to you, Ms. Richardson. Everything. Yes. Except, Margaret paused, Victoria Ashford, Harold's biological daughter. She's contesting the will. Filed yesterday. Grounds of undue influence, diminished capacity, and fraud. She's hired Kellerman and Bach, second largest corporate law firm in California. They specialize in cases like this. Wealthy families fighting over estates. They're very good at what they do. What do? They destroy people like you. Emma's stomach dropped. Victoria Ashford is worth $340 million, Margaret said. She abandoned Harold and Dorothy 23 years ago when they refused to sell family land for her real estate development. She hasn't spoken to them since. But the moment she heard about the inheritance, she filed to contest. She wants everything, and she'll do whatever it takes to get it. I can't fight a billionaire, Emma said. I have $47,000 in debt. I can't even afford. I work pro bono for Harold's beneficiaries, Margaret interrupted. He arranged that decades ago, paid me retainer fees in advance for exactly the situation. You won't pay me a cent, but I need you to prepare for what's coming. Can you do that? Emma thought about Harold's tears. Dorothy's hands. That note. Yes, she said. I can do that. Emma sat in her car outside Rosie's diner for an hour after that phone call. Couldn't move. Couldn't think. Couldn't process what Margaret had told her. $8.7 million. Gold bars. A billionaire daughter who wanted Emma destroyed. She thought about walking away, just signing whatever papers Victoria wanted, disclaiming the inheritance, going back to her simple life, where she was broke, but at least she understood the rules. But then she remembered Dorothy's hands gripping hers. Paper-thin skin, surprising strength. God sees everything, sweetheart. She remembered Harold crying over soup he couldn't afford, except he could afford it. Could afford anything. He'd chosen poverty, chosen humiliation, chosen to test Emma in the exact moment when helping someone else would hurt her most. They'd watched her, documented her, decided she was worthy. And now their daughter, who'd abandoned them, who hadn't spoken to them in 23 years, who apparently valued real estate developments over her own parents, wanted to erase everything Harold and Dorothy had chosen. Walking away meant telling Harold and Dorothy their choice didn't matter. Meant telling herself that $20 and human dignity were worthless. Meant accepting that systems designed to keep people like her small and grateful and invisible would always win. Emma pulled out her phone, called Margaret back. What do I need to do? Margaret's exhale was audible relief. First, do not speak to anyone about this without me present. Victoria's people will come for you. Private investigators, lawyers, maybe journalists. She'll try to make you look like a con artist who manipulated vulnerable elderly victims. She'll dig through your entire life looking for anything criminal, immoral, or questionable. She'll interview your coworkers, your family, your creditors, anyone who's ever known you. Okay. Second, we document everything. Every interaction you had with Harold and Dorothy. Every witness who can testify to your character. Every piece of evidence proving you didn't know about their wealth. We build a case that shows you exactly who Harold thought you were. Okay. Third, Margaret's voice turned serious. You need to prepare for war. Victoria Ashford hasn't lost a legal battle in 23 years. She's vicious, patient, absolutely convinced you stole what belongs to her. She will make your life hell for months, maybe years. She'll drag your family through proceedings designed to humiliate you into submission. She'll make you wish you'd never met Harold and Dorothy. Emma stared through her windshield at Rosie's diner. Peeling paint. Flickering neon sign. The place where she'd spent 3 years being invisible. I'm a waitress with $47,000 in debt, she said. How do I fight someone with unlimited money? You don't fight her money, Margaret said. You fight her with truth, with documentation, with witnesses who saw what really happened, with Harold's own words explaining exactly why he chose you. She has power. We have evidence. And in court, evidence wins. But Emma, Margaret paused. You need to understand what you're facing. This won't be easy. This won't be quick. Victoria will try to break you. Can you survive that? Emma thought about Jake, about nursing school, about every time she'd made herself small so other people could be comfortable, about every double shift and maxed credit card and meal she'd skipped so her brother could stay alive. She thought about systems designed to crush people the moment they stepped out of line, the moment they inherited something they weren't supposed to have, the moment they stopped being invisible. I can survive it, Emma said. Good, Margaret replied. Then let's go to war. Margaret sent Emma homework that night, an email with 19 questions. Write down every memory of Harold and Dorothy. Timeline their visit minute by minute. List every witness present. Describe your financial situation. Explain why you helped them. Document every other time you'd helped customers. Build a pattern of behavior that proves this wasn't manipulation. It was character. Emma sat in her apartment until 3 in the morning. She wrote everything she could remember about October 16th. Harold and Dorothy walking in at 6:12. Their slow, careful movements. Booth 7 with the torn vinyl. Harold's flannel shirt with patches on the elbows. Dorothy's homemade dress and missing buttons. Their shoes held together with glue. How they'd studied the menu. Whispered to each other. Ordered the cheapest things. How Harold's hands had trembled when he set down the menu. How Dorothy folded napkins into perfect triangles. How their wedding bands were simple gold worn thin from decades. She described bringing their food. How they'd eaten slowly, made it last, split everything exactly in half. She wrote about the check, the coin counting, Harold's face turning red, Dorothy squeezing his arm, the silent tears sliding down his weathered cheeks. She wrote about her choice, looking at Rick's office, knowing she'd be in trouble, pulling the 20 from her apron anyway, the lie about the overpayment, walking away before they could argue. She wrote about Dorothy taking her hands, leaning close, whispering God sees everything. She wrote about the note they'd left. For you, he showed us what's left. Then she listed witnesses. Rick Donovan, her manager. Carlos Martinez, the line cook. Beth Alvarez, the other waitress on shift. Plus 6 customers whose faces she remembered, but whose names she didn't know. Booth 2 had been a trucker. Booth 4 had been an elderly woman. Booth 8 had been a family with 3 kids. She described Booth 7's exact location. Corner spot. View of Route 58 through windows. Torn vinyl on the seat. Close enough to Rick's office that he could watch the dining room. Then came the hard part. Her financial situation. 5 max credit cards. $47,000 in debt spread across medical bills, payday loans, hospital payment plans. Jake's leukemia. $8,000 monthly for treatments. Her mother's retail job bringing in $1,800 a month after taxes. Emma's 2 jobs. 16-hour days. 6 days a week. The Honda Civic with 230,000 miles and a check engine light she couldn't afford to investigate. The nursing school acceptance letter deferred twice. The dream she put on hold. The math she did every night that never added up. She wrote about other times she'd helped customers. The single mother she'd comped pancakes for when her debit card was declined. The veteran she'd given free coffee to every morning for a month. The teenager who'd come in crying about being kicked out of his house. Emma had slipped him extra fries and $20 from her own tips. Patterns of behavior. Evidence of character. At 3:47 a.m., Emma emailed Margaret 2,400 words. Margaret responded at 4:02 a.m. This is excellent. Now the hard part. Security footage. Rosie's diner has cameras. We need October 16th footage before Victoria's team gets to Rick and makes it disappear. Can you get it? Emma stared at that message. Rick barely tolerated her. Asking for security footage meant explaining everything, meant admitting what was happening, meant risking that he'd cooperate with Victoria's investigators instead of helping Emma. But it was evidence, proof of transaction, proof of timeline, proof that Emma hadn't known about Harold's wealth, proof that she'd helped out of compassion, not manipulation. She texted Rick at 6:15 a.m. Need to talk before my shift. It's important. He responded at 6:48. My office 2 p.m. The black Mercedes appeared on October 29th during Emma's evening shift. Emma was refilling coffee for a trucker at booth 3 when the diner went quiet, the kind of silence that happens when something wrong enters a space, when people sense danger without understanding what they're sensing. She looked up. Through the window, she saw a car that cost more than Emma would earn in 5 years, maybe 10. Black paint so perfect it looked liquid, chrome that caught the setting sun and threw it back like a weapon. The driver's door opened. Out stepped Victoria Ashford. Even from inside, Emma could see that wealth wasn't just something Victoria had. It was armor, protection, a suit of Chanel and designer sunglasses and heels that clicked against asphalt like gunshots. She walked toward the diner with 2 men flanking her, both wearing matching navy suits, both carrying leather folders that looked expensive enough to be evidence of something. The diner's fluorescent lights seemed too harsh suddenly, too revealing. Victoria's polished presentation made everything around her look shabby, broken, poor. She stopped at the host stand, surveyed the restaurant like she was calculating property values, deciding what it would cost to tear this place down and build something better. Then her eyes locked on Emma. Emma Richardson? Her voice carried, trained, sharp, designed to command rooms and courtrooms and boardrooms where decisions got made that crushed people like Emma without anyone noticing. Emma's coffee pot shook in her hand. Yes, I'm Victoria Ashford, Harold Miller's daughter. We need to talk. Now. Rick appeared from his office, sensing trouble the way managers always do. Carlos paused at the grill. Beth stopped clearing table 3. Customers twisted in booths, catching the scent of drama. Emma set down the coffee pot carefully. I'm working. This concerns your fraudulent claim to my father's estate, Victoria said, loud enough for everyone to hear, loud enough to make sure every person in Rosie's diner understood Emma had done something wrong. You can speak with me now or with police later. Your choice. The diner went dead silent. Emma felt every eye on her, felt her face burning, felt the weight of being exposed as someone who'd apparently committed a crime everyone was about to witness. I don't know what you're talking about, Emma said. Victoria smiled. It wasn't warm. Then let me explain. Victoria's lawyers moved into position, one on each side of her. They pulled papers from their leather folders with practiced efficiency, like they'd done this 100 times before. October 16th, Victoria said. Her tone was prosecutor perfect. You interacted with Harold and Dorothy Miller, correct? Emma nodded. Her voice had disappeared somewhere. You paid for their meal out of pocket. Why? They were short. I helped. You helped? Victoria repeated the words like they meant something different, something criminal. You helped elderly strangers by inserting yourself into their financial transaction, despite knowing this violated your employer's policies. She glanced at Rick. He shifted uncomfortably. You engaged in conversation designed to elicit personal information. Victoria continued. You touched my mother without consent. Witnesses confirm you held her hand. You accepted money from them afterward, despite claiming charity motivated your actions. They left it on the table, Emma said. I didn't ask. Then, mysteriously, my father executes a will naming you sole beneficiary of assets he spent 40 years accumulating. Assets worth $8.7 million. Assets you claim you knew nothing about. Someone in booth 4 gasped. $8.7 million. Emma felt the energy in the room shift, felt people recalculating who she was, what she'd done, whether the quiet waitress who refilled their coffee was actually a con artist who tricked an old man out of millions. Ms. Richardson, Victoria said, you're either a con artist or you're incredibly fortunate. Which is it? Emma's throat closed. She tried forming words, but nothing came out. Victoria didn't wait for an answer. My investigators have documented your financial desperation. $47,000 in debt. Max credit cards. A family medical crisis. You had motive. You had opportunity. You had two elderly targets whose cognitive decline made them vulnerable to manipulation. Harold didn't have cognitive decline. Emma managed. I spoke with him for 3 minutes. 3 minutes you leveraged into an $8.7 million con. Victoria's smile was surgical, precise, designed to cut without showing blood. Ms. Richardson, I'm prepared to offer you a settlement. Sign away all claims to my father's estate, and I'll pay you $25,000, more than you've earned all year. Refuse, and I'll pursue criminal charges for elder fraud, financial exploitation, and if evidence supports it, murder. The last word landed like a slap. Murder. Someone in booth gasped again. Rick said, well, hold on. But Victoria ignored him. She extended documents toward Emma. Legal papers with signatures and seals and words Emma couldn't read through the panic flooding her vision. You have 72 hours to sign, Victoria said. After that, every resource I've goes toward destroying your life. I've already filed complaints with the California Attorney General, Adult Protective Services, local police. Reporters are digging into your background as we speak. I didn't do anything wrong, Emma whispered. Your brother's medical fraud will be investigated. Jake didn't do anything. Emma's voice cracked. Your mother's immigration status will be verified. She was born in Fresno, and every person you've ever helped will be questioned about your pattern of predatory generosity. Victoria dropped the documents on Emma's station. Sign, Ms. Richardson, or I'll make sure you never work again. Never go to nursing school. Never have a life that isn't buried under legal fees and criminal investigations. Your choice. She turned and walked out. Her lawyers followed like matching shadows. The Mercedes drove away. Emma stood shaking in the center of Rosie's diner, while 17 customers stared at her like she'd just been revealed as something monstrous. Something that didn't belong among decent people. Rick pulled Emma into his office 30 seconds later. His face showed sympathy and helplessness in equal measure. The expression of someone about to choose self-preservation over loyalty. Emma, is this real? Did you? I gave them $20 for soup, Emma said. That's it. I didn't know who they were. I didn't manipulate anyone. I wouldn't. But they left you millions. I found out last week. I've never asked anyone for anything except the ability to do my job and get through the day, and... Rick rubbed his face, looked at the closed door, looked at Emma. Corporate's going to hear about this, he said. That woman's going to bury this place in lawyers. Emma, I've got 3 employees with warrants. Carlos doesn't have papers. Beth's on probation. I can't have investigators crawling through here questioning everyone about what? Me giving someone $20. About you inheriting millions from a customer you served once. The way he said it made it sound dirty, suspicious. Like Emma had done something wrong, even if nobody could prove what. So what are you saying? Emma already knew. I need you to take a leave, unpaid, until this resolves. Rick, I've got rent due in 6 days. I'm sorry, Emma. I really am. But I've got 12 other people depending on this place staying open. I can't risk everything for... He trailed off. For you. For a waitress who probably doesn't matter anyway. Emma understood. She cleaned out her locker in silence. The nursing school letter with its worn creases. 3 spare uniforms. A photograph of Jake grinning despite being bald from chemotherapy. Her name tag. She walked past the dining room without looking at anyone. But she felt their stares, felt their judgment, felt the weight of being labeled something she wasn't by people who'd made up their minds based on 30 seconds of accusation. Outside, she sat in her Honda Civic and finally cried. Not elegant movie tears, not quiet sadness, choking, gasping sobs that hurt her ribs, that made her throat raw, that left her shaking and empty and wondering how her life had exploded in the span of 10 days. She'd worked at Rosie's for 3 years, smiled through harassment from customers who treated her like property, worked through financial panic that woke her up at 3 a.m. doing math that never worked out, pushed through exhaustion that made her bones ache. And the moment wealth touched her, even innocently, even accidentally, even through a choice she'd made out of pure compassion, the system turned her into a criminal. before she could defend herself, before anyone asked for her side, before truth mattered at all. Emma called Margaret from her car, tried explaining through tears. Her words came out broken, stuttered, barely coherent. Margaret listened in silence, then said, "This is classic Victoria Ashford. She goes nuclear immediately. Public humiliation, criminal threats, destroy support systems before trial even begins. She's trying to make you fold before discovery, before we access Harold's documentation, proving you weren't the first beneficiary, proving he was mentally sound, proving he and Dorothy planned this for decades." "I just lost my job," Emma said. "I know. Here's what happens now. I file an emergency motion to stop her harassment campaign. I get restraining parameters around what she can investigate. I depose everyone who saw that October 16 transaction, and I get that security footage before her team destroys it." Rick said Victoria's lawyers already contacted him, offered him money for the footage. Margaret swore, actually swore. "How much?" $5,000. "Did he give it to them?" "Not yet." "Then we move fast. Emma, I need you to understand what you're facing. Victoria Ashford has unlimited resources and zero conscience. She will make your life hell for months. She'll drag your family through proceedings designed to humiliate you into submission. She'll make you wish you'd never met Harold and Dorothy. Can you survive that?" Emma wiped her face, looked at her apartment building, looked at the photograph of Jake on her passenger seat, thought about Harold crying over soup, Dorothy's hands gripping hers. That note, "He showed us what's left." Thought about systems designed to keep people like her small, grateful, invisible. Systems that punished the moment you stepped out of line, the moment you inherited something you weren't supposed to have, the moment you stopped accepting your place. "I can survive it," Emma said. "Good," Margaret replied. "Then let's go to war." Emma just lost everything, her job, her reputation, her dignity. Victoria thinks she's won. But what this billionaire doesn't know is that Harold left behind evidence she can't destroy. If you love watching impossible situations flip on the powerful, subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next 30 minutes will show you exactly how truth becomes a weapon when you have nothing else left. Emma returned to Rosie's diner at 5 in the morning, before opening, before Rick could refuse to see her face to face. She knocked on the back door until he appeared, disheveled, half asleep, annoyed. "Emma, I told you. I need the security footage from October 16th. The cameras recorded everything. Me serving Harold and Dorothy, paying their bill, all of it. That footage proves I didn't manipulate anyone. I just helped." Rick hesitated, looked at her, looked away. "Victoria's lawyers already contacted me, offered to pay for access to the footage." Emma's stomach dropped. "Did you give it to them?" "Not yet, but they're offering $5,000. "Emma, that's 2 months of payroll. 2 months I can make without worrying about making rent on this place. They're offering you money to help them destroy evidence that proves I'm innocent," Emma said. Her voice was steady, stronger than she felt. "If that footage disappears, I look guilty. Victoria knows that. She's buying my life away for $5,000. Rick looked at her, really looked, maybe for the first time in 3 years. Saw exhaustion carved into her face. Saw desperation in how she stood. Saw something else too. Dignity that refused to break, no matter how many times the world tried to crush it. He sighed. "Let me make coffee." They sat in his office while the coffee brewed. Rick pulled up the October 16th hard drive on his ancient computer. The system was slow. The interface looked like it hadn't been updated since 2010. He loaded the footage. October 16th, 5:47 p.m. Harold and Dorothy entering booth 7, moving slowly, carefully. Emma approaching with her notepad. The elderly couple studying the menu, whispering to each other, pointing at prices. Emma taking their order. Nothing unusual. No manipulation. Just standard service. Footage at 6:23 p.m. Emma delivering food. Harold and Dorothy eating slowly, splitting the soup exactly in half, making the toast last, talking in murmurs. At 6:41 p.m., Harold flagging Emma for the check. The coin counting started. Harold pulling crumpled bills from his pocket. Dorothy adding change from her purse, counting once, twice. Harold's shoulders hunching, his head dropping. Dorothy's hand on his arm. Then Emma, watching from across the diner, walking over, pulling the 20 from her apron, dropping it on their table, walking away. Dorothy, standing, following Emma, taking her hand. 15 seconds of contact. Dorothy speaking, Emma listening, then parting. The elderly couple leaving the 20 plus all their counted money on the table. Emma clearing booth 7, reading something small, the note, tucking it in her apron. The entire interaction lasted 4 minutes. 4 minutes from order to departure. Nothing criminal. Nothing manipulative. Nothing that looked like an $8.7 million con. Just a waitress showing kindness to struggling customers. Rick burned the footage to 3 USB drives. Handed them to Emma. Tell your lawyer I'm available for deposition. I'll testify to whatever she needs. Emma took the drives, held them like they were made of gold. And Emma, yeah, I'm sorry for what I said, for making you leave. I was scared. I know, Emma said. Everyone's scared of people like Victoria. That's how they win. They make everyone too scared to tell the truth. She left before the sun came up. Margaret scheduled depositions at her San Francisco office. Downtown high-rise, 40th floor. Conference rooms with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. The kind of place that cost more per hour than Emma used to earn in a week. Margaret coached her before the first deposition. Victoria's team will be present. They'll try to rattle you, make you angry, make you defensive. Stay calm. Answer only what's asked. Don't elaborate. Don't explain. Don't get defensive. Just tell the truth. First deposition was Carlos Martinez, Rosie's line cook. Victoria's attorney was Richard Kellerman, 50-something. Expensive suit. Face like he'd been carved from granite and taught to smile only when billing clients. How well do you know Ms. Richardson? 3 years. Good worker. Quiet. Does her job. Has she ever discussed financial problems? Everyone there has financial problems. We work at a diner. Has she ever mentioned schemes to acquire money? Carlos's face hardened. Emma watched him transform from quiet line cook to something protective and angry. Emma? Emma, who gives her lunch away when customers are still hungry? Emma, who loaned me $200 when my daughter needed medicine and never asked for it back? Emma, who worked my shifts when I had the flu, so I wouldn't lose my job? That Emma? Just answer yes or no, Mr. Martinez. No, never. Emma is the best person in that whole place. Maybe the best person I know. Kellerman made notes without expression. Second deposition was Beth Alvarez, fellow waitress. Did you witness Ms. Richardson paying for customers' meals before October 16th? Yeah, a couple times. She's too nice for her own good. Rick yells at her for it. So this was a pattern of behavior designed to establish trust with vulnerable targets. Beth's laugh was sharp, bitter. The laugh of someone who'd worked service too long. You ever work service? No, you haven't. I can tell. People are awful. They scream about cold coffee. Leave 50-cent tips on $40 checks. Grab your ass. Treat you like you're stupid. Like you're not even human. Emma's nice because she's a good person. Not because she's running cons. You think anyone gets rich waiting tables? We do it because there's nothing else. Kellerman tried to interrupt, but Beth kept going. Emma gave away her lunch 3 times a week. Paid for customers who couldn't afford their meals. Stayed late to help close even when she wasn't scheduled. She did that stuff because that's who she is, not because she was targeting millionaires. How would she even know? They looked broke. We all look broke. Third deposition was Rick Donovan, manager. Did Harold and Dorothy Miller exhibit signs of cognitive decline during their visit? Rick hesitated, glanced at Margaret. She nodded. No. They were quiet, polite, ordered clearly, knew exactly what they wanted, counted their money carefully, too carefully, like people who know every dollar matters. Harold was shaky, but that looked like Parkinson's, not dementia. I've managed restaurants 30 years. I know when someone's not all there. They were fine. But you banned Ms. Richardson from paying for customers' meals, suggesting you found her behavior suspicious. I banned it because corporate policy says employees can't use personal funds for transactions. liability issues. Not because Emma's suspicious, because she's too generous for her own good. She'd go broke helping people if I let her. I had to protect her from herself. Fourth deposition was Emma Richardson. Margaret prepared her for 3 hours beforehand. Mock questions, mock cross-examination, strategies for staying calm. Kellerman opened with, Ms. Richardson, how many elderly customers have you targeted with this scheme? I never targeted anyone. How many elderly people have you paid for? Emma took a breath. Let it out slowly. I don't know. 3? 4? Over 3 years. Not just elderly people. Anyone who was struggling. Establishing a pattern of access to vulnerable populations. Helping people who couldn't afford food. How much did Harold Miller tell you about his wealth? Nothing. I didn't know until the attorney's letter. How convenient. You manipulate an elderly man into changing his will. He dies, and suddenly you didn't know you'd inherit millions. Margaret interjected. Objection. Assumes facts, not an evidence. But Kellerman continued without pause. You touched Dorothy Miller without consent, correct? She took my hand to thank me. You accepted money from them despite claiming charitable intent. They left it on the table. I didn't ask for it, but you kept it. Yes, because you're not actually charitable. You're transactional. Emma's jaw tightened. Margaret touched her arm. A warning. Don't react. Don't get angry. That's what he wants. Emma forced her voice steady. I kept it because I have $47,000 in debt. My brother has cancer. I needed gas money to get home. I'm not a saint. I'm just someone who helps when I can. The deposition lasted 4 hours. Kellerman tried everything. Suggested Emma had researched Harold online before the encounter. Implied she'd poisoned soup. Questioned why elderly millionaires would eat at cheap diners unless they'd been lured there. Emma answered every question with exhausted honesty. When it ended, she went to the bathroom and threw up. Margaret received Harold's personal effects from his estate executor. For banker's boxes, 34 years of documentation packed into cardboard and tape. They opened them in her conference room. Box 1 contained journals. Leather-bound notebooks dating back to 1991. Every page filled with Harold's neat handwriting. Small, precise letters that suggested care and intention. The entries cataloged their travels. Small towns across America. Diners, gas stations, churches, grocery stores. Each entry described someone they'd observed. A grocery clerk in Montana who helped an elderly woman reach items on high shelves. Carried her bags to her car. Refused a tip. A mechanic in Arizona who fixed a single mother's car for free when she couldn't afford the repair. A teacher in Oregon who bought winter coats for students with her own money. 53 people total over 34 years. Beside each name, follow-up notes. The grocery clerk received $15,000 for his daughter's college tuition. Anonymous cashier's check that arrived 2 months later. The mechanic got new tools and shop equipment. Anonymous delivery with a note saying, only for your kindness. The teacher received a foundation grant for $30,000 to continue helping students. Harold and Dorothy had been secret angels, operating in silence, rewarding goodness nobody else noticed. Emma's entry read, October 16, 2025. Bakersfield, California. Waitress named Emma Richardson at Rosie's Diner. We were short on purpose. Test of character. Emma paid despite obvious financial strain, despite manager's oversight, despite policy violation. Dorothy spoke to her afterward. Emma's hands were shaking. She gave from poverty, not abundance. That's the distinction. She's the one. Our last one. The inheritance goes to her. Box 2 contained financial records, bank statements, stock trades executed days before Harold's death, correspondence with Margaret proving mental sharpness, medical evaluations from 3 different doctors confirming 0 cognitive decline, documentation of Victoria's estrangement, letters Harold had sent over 23 years, all returned unopened, envelopes marked return to sender in angry handwriting. A 1999 restraining order Victoria had filed against her own parents. The complaint accused them of harassment for opposing her real estate development that required demolishing a community center serving low-income families. Box 3 contained video recordings, dozens of cassette tapes, VHS, then mini-DV, then digital files on thumb drives, labeled by year. Margaret loaded one from October 2025. On screen appeared Harold, gaunt but clear-eyed, sitting in an RV. Afternoon light coming through windows behind him. My name is Harold James Miller. Today is October 17th, 2025. I am of sound mind and body, though my heart is failing. His voice was steady, strong, absolutely lucid. Yesterday, Dorothy and I met Emma Richardson, a waitress at a roadside diner in Bakersfield. We tested her by coming up short on our bill. She paid for us without hesitation, despite obvious financial hardship, despite knowing her manager was watching, despite policy that would get her in trouble. She showed us dignity when we presented as people not worth dignity. Harold paused, looked directly at the camera. I am changing my will to name her sole beneficiary of my estate. My daughter Victoria abandoned us in 1992 when we refused to sell family land for her development project. She has not spoken to us in 23 years. She does not deserve my father's legacy. Emma Richardson does. Another pause. If Victoria contests this, and she will, let this recording and all documentation show, I was not manipulated. I was not confused. I made this choice with full awareness and intention. Emma Richardson embodies values Victoria has spent her life destroying. Let the better person win. The recording ended. Emma sat in Margaret's conference room crying so hard she couldn't breathe. Box 4 contained Dorothy's letter, written days before her death. Sealed envelope marked to be read if Emma Richardson is challenged. Margaret opened it carefully. Inside were 3 pages in shaky handwriting. Dorothy's hand had been failing near the end. The letter described their 40-year mission, the 52 people they'd helped before Emma, why Emma mattered. The final paragraph read, if someone is trying to take this from Emma, it means we were right about her. She deserves every penny. Protect her. She represents what's left of goodness in a world that's forgotten how to care. Emma read that letter 3 times. Each time the words blurred through tears. Harold and Dorothy hadn't just left her money. They'd left her proof. Proof that she mattered. Proof that kindness, when you had nothing to give, was the purest form of humanity. Proof that character could be documented, measured, rewarded. While Margaret built Emma's case, Victoria launched full assault. Private investigators followed Emma everywhere, photographed her apartment building, interviewed neighbors about her habits, went through her trash looking for evidence of hidden wealth or criminal behavior. Articles started appearing in papers, local first, then regional. Waitress inherits millions from elderly customers she served once. Family cries foul. Bakersfield woman accused of elder fraud in $8.7 million inheritance. Did kindness or con artistry win this waitress millions? The comments online were vicious. Gold digger, scam artist, murderer. Someone found Emma's Facebook profile, posted her address, encouraged justice. Emma started receiving death threats, messages saying she deserved to die, that someone should finish what she'd started. Her mother's workplace got harassed, callers claiming she was hiding money from the government, demanding she be fired before the business got investigated too. Jake's hospital received anonymous complaints, suggestions that his treatment was funded by fraud, demands for audits. Emma's credit card companies were contacted with allegations of financial misconduct. All 5 cards were frozen pending investigation. Her landlord received legal notice that she was involved in litigation, suggestion that he evict her to avoid complications when she inevitably got arrested. Victoria's legal team filed motion after motion. Motion to freeze the entire estate until trial concluded. Motion to compel Emma to undergo psychiatric evaluation to determine if she was mentally fit to manage inheritance. Motion to depose every single person Emma had ever helped. Build a pattern of predatory behavior. Motion to access Emma's complete financial records going back 10 years. Motion to ban Emma from discussing the case publicly while Victoria's team leaked information to Press Daily. Margaret fought each motion, filed counters, requested sanctions for harassment. But the damage kept compounding. Emma couldn't find work. Every background check revealed pending litigation. Nobody wanted to hire someone who might be a criminal. She couldn't afford rent. No income. No access to credit cards. Legal freeze meant she couldn't touch the inheritance, even though it was technically hers. She couldn't help Jake anymore. Her accounts were flagged. Her mother had to cover everything alone. Emma moved into her car November 12th, parked behind a Bakersfield grocery store, slept in her back seat with a blanket she'd had since college, showered at a 24-hour gym using a free trial membership. Margaret offered to loan her money. Emma refused, terrified that Victoria would use it as proof Emma was motivated by greed, that she'd accept money from anyone. At night, parked under streetlights so she felt safer, Emma read Harold's journals. Read about 52 other people like her, struggling, decent, invisible to everyone except Harold and Dorothy. Read about Harold's father, Joseph Miller, Croatian immigrant who'd worked Pennsylvania steel mills for 60 years, saved every penny, died in 1978, leaving Harold $2 million with one instruction: give it to people who still care. Emma wasn't fighting for money anymore. She was fighting for Harold's mission, for the idea that goodness wasn't worthless, for proof that systems designed to crush people like her could be beaten, not with power, not with wealth, but with simple documented truth. She called Margaret at 2 a.m, sitting in her car, cold enough to see her breath. I want to countersue Victoria for harassment, defamation, emotional distress, everything. Margaret was silent. Then, Emma, that extend the fight. Cost more time, more exposure, more suffering before this ends. She's trying to erase me, Emma said. Make me disappear like I never mattered. I want her to know that's not free. Make her pay. Another pause. Okay, Margaret said. Let's make her pay. The probate trial commenced December 4th in Fresno County Superior Court. Victoria arrived like she was attending a board meeting. 6 attorneys from Kellerman and Bach surrounding her, assistants carrying file boxes, an air of absolute confidence that money always wins. Emma arrived with Margaret and a single folder. Inside was Harold's video recording and 3 pages of notes. The gallery overflowed. Journalists with cameras and recording devices. Curious locals who'd follow the story. Other waitresses from Rosie's Diner wearing matching shirts that read, "We stand with Emma." Judge Patricia Morrison presided, 62 years old, former public defender who'd spent 20 years watching corporate lawyers crush poor people. She had a reputation for impatience with bullying and zero tolerance for theatrics. She reviewed the case filings, looked at both legal teams. This is probate court, not theater. I want facts, evidence, and brevity. Mr. Kellerman, you're contesting Harold Miller's, well, on what grounds? Kellerman stood, confident, rehearsed. Your Honor, Harold Miller suffered cognitive decline. He was manipulated by Ms. Richardson through calculated targeting. He executed his will under undue influence. Will prove Ms. Richardson engaged in predatory behavior designed to isolate vulnerable elderly individuals from family. She inserted herself into his life for financial gain. We seek to void the will and restore assets to their rightful heir, Harold's daughter, Victoria Ashford. Judge Morrison turned to Margaret. Ms. Whitmore, Your Honor, Harold Miller was of sound mind. He documented his intentions extensively through journals, video testimony, and letters. He chose Ms. Richardson as beneficiary after 40 years of similar charitable acts to 52 other people. This wasn't sudden behavior. This was his life's mission. Victoria Ashford abandoned her parents 23 years ago, filed legal action against them, only reappeared when she heard about inheritance. This case is about a bitter, estranged daughter trying to steal from someone her father deemed worthy. We'll prove Mr. Miller's will is valid. His judgment was sound, and Ms. Richardson deserves every penny he left her. Judge Morrison nodded, made notes. Proceed. Kellerman called his first witness, Dr. Raymond Chu, geriatric psychiatrist Victoria had hired to review Harold's medical records. He'd never met Harold in life. Dr. Chu, did Harold Miller show signs of cognitive decline? Based on my review of medical records, Mr. Miller exhibited memory inconsistencies typical of early dementia, changes in judgment, impulsive decision-making. Margaret stood. Objection. Dr. Chu never examined Harold Miller while he was alive. This is speculation based on incomplete records. Judge Morrison looked at Kellerman. Sustained. Mr. Kellerman, unless your witness has first-hand knowledge, his testimony is opinion, not fact. Kellerman tried to pivot. Dr. Chu, could someone in Harold's condition be vulnerable to manipulation? Absolutely. Elderly individuals with declining cognition are prime targets for financial exploitation. Objection. Margaret was on her feet. Assumes facts, not an evidence. There's no evidence of declining cognition. Dr. Chu is testifying to hypotheticals. Sustained. Kellerman's frustration showed. His confident opening was crumbling. Second witness was Victoria Ashford herself. She took the stand wearing black Chanel. Hair perfect. Makeup subtle. Expression carefully arranged into grief. Ms. Ashford, describe your relationship with your father. Victoria's voice was practiced. Sad but controlled. My father was a difficult man. Stubborn. Set in his ways. We disagreed about business practices. I wanted to develop family land to create jobs and economic opportunity. He refused. We became estranged. But I never stopped loving him. When I heard he died and left everything to a stranger he'd met once, I was devastated. My father would never do that unless someone had convinced him his own daughter didn't matter. Did you attempt reconciliation? Many times. I sent letters. Tried calling. He wouldn't respond. Margaret's turn for cross-examination. Ms. Ashford, you filed a restraining order against your parents in 1999. Correct. Victoria's jaw tightened. That was a misunderstanding. Yes or no, Ms. Ashford? Yes, but you accused them of harassing you because they opposed your real estate development, a development that required demolishing a community center serving low-income families. Correct. That's not the full context. Yes or no? Yes. You haven't spoken to your parents in 23 years. Haven't sent them money. Haven't visited them. Haven't acknowledged their existence until you learned of this inheritance. Correct? I tried to reach out. Yes or no, Ms. Ashford? Victoria's mask slipped. Anger flashed across her face. Yes. No further questions. Kellerman called 4 more witnesses. Handwriting analysts who suggested Harold's signature looked shaky. Financial experts who questioned why someone with millions would live in poverty. Former neighbors who barely remembered Harold. Margaret dismantled each one. Handwriting analyst? Mr. Harold had Parkinson's disease. His trembling hands were documented by 3 physicians. His signature was shaky because he was sick, not confused. Financial expert? Harold lived modestly by choice. He and his wife spent 40 years documenting acts of kindness and rewarding good people. They helped 53 people before Ms. Richardson. Here are the journals. Here are the canceled checks. Here is documentation going back to 1991. Former neighbors? You barely knew him. He traveled constantly. He didn't stay in one place long enough for you to judge his mental state. By day 2, Kellerman's case was unraveling like cheap thread. Margaret opened with Harold's video. The courtroom went silent as the screen lit up. Harold's face appeared, gaunt, tired, but his eyes were clear. His voice was steady. My name is Harold James Miller. Today is October 17th, 2025. I am of sound mind and body, though my heart is failing. The recording played in full. 7 minutes of Harold explaining his mission, his choice, his absolute certainty that Emma was worthy. When it ended, Victoria was pale. Her attorneys were whispering urgently. Judge Morrison made notes without expression. Margaret called Emma to the stand. Emma wore the only nice outfit she owned. Clothes Margaret had bought her because Emma had been living in her car for 3 weeks, and everything she owned smelled like desperation. Margaret's voice was gentle. Emma, describe October 16th for the court. Emma told the story. Booth 7, soup and toast, counted coins. Harold's, shaking hands. Dorothy's whispered reassurances. The choice Emma made, pulling the 20 from her apron. The lie about the overpayment. Dorothy's hands gripping hers. The whispered blessing. Her voice cracked, describing their faces. The relief, the gratitude, the dignity restored by $20 and a simple lie. Did you know Harold was wealthy? No. Did you ask for anything in return? No. Did you expect anything? No. They reminded me of my grandparents. I couldn't watch them be humiliated over soup. Kellerman's cross-examination was aggressive. Ms. Richardson, you're in debt. Correct. Yes. Your brother has expensive medical needs. Yes. You do anything to help him. Within legal limits, yes. Including manipulating elderly millionaires. Objection. Margaret was standing, sustained. But Kellerman pressed forward. You kept money they left despite claiming charity motivated you. Because I needed gas money to get home. I'm not independently wealthy. I can't afford to turn down tips. But you can afford to turn down Victoria's $25,000 settlement. Emma met his eyes, held them. That settlement required me to call Harold and Dorothy confused victims. Required me to call myself con artist. I'm not rich enough to lie about who I am. The gallery murmured approval. Judge Morrison banged her gavel once. Margaret called Rick Donovan. He testified about Emma's character, her pattern of helping customers, her financial struggles, how the October 16th interaction was completely normal for Emma. Carlos Martinez testified next, described Emma giving away her lunch, loaning him money she didn't have, working his shifts when he was sick. Beth Alvarez testified, told stories about Emma staying late to help close even when she wasn't scheduled, about customers who were awful to her and how she smiled anyway. 3 regular customers testified, people Emma had helped over the years. Comped meals, free coffee, extra food slipped onto plates when they looked hungry. Margaret's final witness was a video deposition from Dr. Ellen Rosen, Harold's physician. Harold Miller was my patient for 12 years. I evaluated him 2 weeks before his death for life insurance purposes. Ran full cognitive tests, memory, reasoning, decision-making. Harold was sharp. No signs of dementia, confusion, or diminished capacity. He knew exactly what he was doing. Margaret rested her case. Judge Morrison took 1 day for deliberation. December 6th, she returned with her ruling. I've reviewed all evidence, testimony, and documentation presented by both parties. Several things are abundantly clear. The courtroom was silent. Emma's hands shook in her lap. First, Harold Miller was of sound mind. Medical records from multiple physicians. Video testimony recorded days before his death. Stock trades executed with clear judgment. All prove beyond doubt he understood his actions. Victoria's face remained impassive. Second, Emma Richardson did not manipulate, coerce, or unduly influence Harold Miller. Security footage shows a brief interaction lasting 4 minutes. No extended contact. No relationship that could constitute undue influence. Just a waitress helping customers who couldn't pay their bill. Emma's throat tightened. Third, Harold Miller had a documented 40-year history of rewarding strangers for acts of kindness. Journals detailing 53 beneficiaries. Emma Richardson was not an anomaly. She was the culmination of his life's work. Judge Morrison looked directly at Victoria. Fourth, Victoria Ashford abandoned her parents 23 years ago. Filed legal action against them. Returned their letters unopened. Only reappeared upon learning of inheritance. Her claim to be motivated by love is contradicted by decades of documented indifference. Victoria's mask cracked. Her jaw tightened. Finally, Harold Miller left extensive documentation explicitly stating his intentions and anticipating this exact challenge. His wishes are crystal clear. Judge Morrison's voice hardened. Ms. Ashford, your father chose someone who showed him dignity over a daughter who showed him contempt. That was his right. This court finds Harold Miller's will valid and enforceable. All assets transferred to Emma Richardson as specified. The gallery erupted. Whispers. Gasps. Someone started clapping. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued, I'm sanctioning Kellerman and Bach $50,000 for filing frivolous harassment motions designed to intimidate rather than establish facts. And I'm ordering Victoria Ashford to pay Emma Richardson's legal fees and $100,000 in damages for defamation and emotional distress. Emma collapsed into Margaret's arms, sobbing, shaking, unable to process that it was over. "Ms. Richardson," Judge Morrison said. Her voice was softer now. "The estate is yours. Mr. Miller chose well." Victoria left without a word. Her attorneys followed like mourners at a funeral. Outside the courthouse, journalists swarmed Emma. Cameras, microphones, questions shouted from every direction. Emma wiped her face, stood straight. "This was never about money," she said. "This was about honoring two people who believed kindness still matters." "I'm grateful," Judge Morrison agreed. "Harold and Dorothy deserved better than what they got from their daughter. I hope I can honor their memory the way they wanted." She walked to Margaret's car and didn't look back. Emma signed final estate documents in Margaret's office December 10th. The $8.7 million transferred to accounts Margaret helped establish: trusts, investment portfolios, liquid funds for immediate use. Emma stared at bank statements, showing balances she couldn't comprehend, numbers that didn't feel real. Her first action was paying off Jake's medical debt entirely, $180,000, gone with the wire transfer. She called her mother, could barely get words out through crying. "Jake's treatments are covered. All of it, everything, forever." Her mother sobbed so hard she couldn't speak, just kept saying thank you over and over until the words lost meaning. Second action was paying off every family in Jake's cancer ward. 11 families drowning in medical debt. People she'd met in waiting rooms. Parents who'd become friends through shared trauma. $640,000 total. The hospital called it unprecedented. A miracle. Third action was establishing the Miller Foundation. $3 million. Dedicated to continuing Harold and Dorothy's mission of finding and rewarding everyday kindness. Fourth action was donating to organizations serving low-income families. $2 million spread across community centers, food banks, scholarship funds. Places that help people like Emma when nobody else would. What Emma kept for herself was $3 million. Enough for security. Nursing school. A modest home. A life without panic waking her at 3 a.m. to do math that never worked. And the gold bars. All 47 of them. Stamped Miller and Son Steel, 1952. She had them displayed in a custom case. Glass front. Soft lighting. A plaque reading Dorothy's words. "God sees everything." They sat in her new apartment. Modest 2-bedroom in Bakersfield. Nothing extravagant. Nothing that screamed wealth. Just a reminder of where she came from. Why it mattered. What Harold and Dorothy had believed about her. January 2026. Emma enrolled in nursing school full-time. She walked into orientation wearing scrubs she'd finally earned the right to own, carrying textbooks she could afford, without calculating which bill wouldn't get paid, sitting among students who didn't know she was a millionaire or tabloid story, just another person chasing a deferred dream. Her apartment had real furniture, not curbside salvage, not crates turned into tables, actual furniture from actual stores. Her car was 3 years old, Toyota Camry, used but reliable. No check engine light. No prayers required to start the engine. Her credit cards were paid off. Credit score slowly rebuilding from the ruins Victoria's investigation had created. But Emma still lived carefully. Still bought generic groceries. Still checked prices before putting things in her cart. Still calculated costs before making purchases. Wealth hadn't erased poverty's reflexes. It had just made survival less desperate, made breathing a little easier. She visited Rosie's diner once a month. Rick had rehired her symbolically. She didn't work shifts, but her name tag hung on the wall with a framed photo. Emma Richardson, 2022 to 2025, best of us. She left $500 tips for servers working doubles, bought meals for customers who counted change, funded medical emergencies for staff who couldn't afford them. The diner became a sort of pilgrimage site. People who'd read her story came hoping to witness kindness in action, hoping Emma would appear, hoping to see proof that poverty and goodness could still be rewarded in America. Emma hated the attention, but she understood what it meant. People needed to believe character mattered, that doing the right thing wasn't foolish, that systems designed to crush ordinary people could be beaten. She did interviews sparingly. 60 Minutes sent a crew. NPR did a radio piece. Local news followed her to nursing school. Each time, she told the same story. Harold and Dorothy didn't give me money. They gave me proof. Proof that how you treat people when nobody's watching defines who you are. I'm not special. I just helped when I could. We all should. The interviews always ended with the same question. What would you tell Victoria Ashford if you could? Emma's answer never changed. That her parents loved her, wanted reconciliation, would have forgiven everything if she just asked. The inheritance wasn't about money. It was about values. You can't inherit values. You have to live them. The Miller Foundation launched March 2026. Emma hired Margaret as lead counsel, assembled a board of people who understood struggle. Rick from Rosie's Diner, Carlos the line cook, Beth the waitress, 2 social workers from Bakersfield, a retired teacher who'd spent 30 years in underfunded schools. Their mission was simple: find people showing extraordinary kindness in ordinary circumstances. Reward them secretly. First recipient was a grocery clerk in Modesto, 23 years old, working minimum wage, using his own paycheck to buy food for homeless customers who came in. The foundation paid off his student loans, $35,000. Second recipient was a mechanic in Stockton, single father, fixed cars for single mothers for free when they couldn't afford repairs. Lost money every time but couldn't watch kids without transportation. The foundation bought him a new shop, $120,000. Third recipient was a teacher in Fresno, spent her own salary buying winter coats for students whose families couldn't afford them, had been doing it for 15 years. The foundation funded her classroom for 10 years, $80,000. Each recipient received the same letter. You were chosen by the Miller Foundation for demonstrating character when nobody was watching. This gift honors your actions. Pay it forward when you can. They also received a small gold bar, stamped Miller & Son Steel, 1952, a reminder of immigrant values, hard work, generosity across generations. The foundation helped 8 people its first year. Emma visited each one personally, sat with them, explained Harold and Dorothy's story, showed them the journals documenting 40 years of secret kindness, made clear they weren't alone. Kindness isn't foolish, she told them. It's the only thing that matters. By year 2, the foundation attracted donors nationwide. People sent $5, $500, $5,000, amounts that said, I want to believe in this. The fund grew beyond Emma's initial contribution. Goodness, it turned out, was contagious. Emma graduated nursing school May 2028. She took a position at the same hospital where Jake had received treatment, pediatric oncology. She worked full shifts despite not needing income, despite being able to buy the hospital if she wanted. Her colleagues didn't know about the inheritance, didn't know she was the waitress from the news 2 years ago. They just knew Emma stayed late, held parents' hands through bad news, bought meals for families sleeping in waiting rooms. She rented a modest house near her mother, 3 bedrooms, small yard, nothing that screamed wealth. She drove her Toyota Camry until it hit 100,000 miles, then bought another used Toyota. She dated occasionally, nothing serious. Most relationships ended when she tried explaining her life. She spent weekends with Jake. He'd been in remission 3 years now, attending community college, studying biology, planning to become a cancer researcher, planning to spend his life helping people the way Emma's inheritance had helped him. On quiet evenings, Emma sat with the gold bars in their case. Read Harold's journals she'd kept, all 34 years of documentation. Sometimes she cried for the life she'd almost had, drowning in debt, grinding through double shifts, believing she'd never matter. Sometimes she cried for Harold and Dorothy, who'd spent 40 years proving the world still had good people, who'd chosen her as their final proof. Mostly she felt grateful, not for money, for being seen, for mattering, for validation that kindness when you have nothing to give is the purest form of human decency. 3 years after the trial, Emma attended the Miller Foundation's annual gathering. 53 people filled a Bakersfield community center. All the beneficiaries Harold and Dorothy had helped over 40 years, gathered together for the first time. Teachers and mechanics and nurses and veterans, single parents and immigrants and students, people who'd shown character when it cost them. Each shared their story. Each held a gold bar stamped with Joseph Miller's name. The grocery clerk had used his reward to open a non-profit grocery in a food desert. Served 3,000 families monthly. The mechanic trained formerly incarcerated people in auto repair. Gave them skills and second chances nobody else would. The teachers' students had a 100% graduation rate. Kids from neighborhoods where graduation was rare. On and on. 53 people who'd been rewarded for goodness, who'd used those rewards to multiply kindness exponentially. Emma stood before them. Harold and Dorothy Miller believed ordinary people doing extraordinary things in quiet moments are the foundation of a decent society. You're proof they were right. Keep going. Keep caring. Keep being the reason someone else doesn't give up. They raised their gold bars in tribute, not to wealth, to values that outlast money, to the stubborn belief that how we treat each other matters more than what we accumulate. Emma's story proves that kindness isn't weakness. It's evidence. If this story moved you, do two things. First, hit the like button, so more people who need to hear this can find it. Second, drop a comment telling me about a time someone showed you unexpected kindness. I read every single one. And if you want more true stories where ordinary people refuse to stay invisible, subscribe. Because the world needs reminders that character still matters. Thank you for watching. Emma learned that inheritance isn't about money. It's about values passed between strangers who recognize something worth preserving in each other. Harold and Dorothy gave her more than gold bars. They gave her permission to believe her kindness mattered. That poverty didn't disqualify her from having worth. That character could be measured and rewarded in a world obsessed with power. 3 years later, living in a modest house and working as a pediatric oncology nurse, Emma understood what they'd known all along. The real inheritance was the choice they'd validated. The $20 she'd given when she had nothing. The dignity she'd protected. The refusal to let cruelty win. Money runs out. Values endure. And somewhere Harold and Dorothy were watching, knowing they'd chosen right, knowing their final beneficiary understood what truly mattered. Not the gold, the heart willing to give when giving cost everything.